Mr. President, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, as the expression goes, it's time for Democrats to fish or cut bait. We have 2 days until government funding expires. And Democrats need to decide if they're going to support funding legislation that came over from the House or if they're going to shut down the government. So far, it's looking like they plan to shut it down. The Democrat leader came to the floor yesterday afternoon and had the nerve to complain about the House bill. He wants yet another short-term piece of funding legislation to be, as he said, give Congress time to negotiate bipartisan legislation that can pass, end quote. Well, Mr. President, I'm not sure how long the Democrat leader thinks we should drag out the funding process for fiscal year 2025. Until fiscal year 2026, beyond, we are already nearly 6 months into the 2025 fiscal year. In other words, we are halfway through this fiscal year, and it is past time to get fiscal year 2025 funding situated. You know, I'd like to suggest to the Democrat leader that if he has problems with the current situation, maybe, just maybe, he should have funded the government when he was in charge. The reason we're stuck here voting on a CR for the rest of 2025 is because the Democrat leader refused to consider appropriation bills last year. Senators Murray and Collins, then chair and vice chair of the Appropriations Committee, did a lot of work to deliver the fiscal year 2025 appropriation bills. In fact, they had moved 11 of the 12 bills out of the Appropriations Committee by the end of August last year, or I should say the end of July last year. And 6 of those bills, 6 of the 11 that the Appropriations Committee passed by the end of July last year, passed unanimously coming out of the committee. The others were passed with big bipartisan majorities. And then what happened? Well, then the Democrat leader just sat on them. In his remaining 5 months as Majority Leader, he didn't bring single fiscal year 2025 appropriations bill to the floor. And so it is absolutely rich for him to be coming down to the floor now to call for a short-term CR, another short-term CR, to negotiate fiscal 2025 legislation. Mr. President, he had his chance for months. I'm no fan of continuing resolutions. In fact, I intend to do my very best to ensure that from here on out, the government is funded through appropriation bills that proceed through regular order. But at this point, our best option is a continuing resolution to fund the remainder of fiscal year 2025 and clear the decks for the fiscal year 2026 appropriations process to begin. Because while the Democrat leader may have forgotten, given his decision to ignore regular order appropriations last year, it is almost time to start considering fiscal year 2026 appropriation bills. And I fully intend for us to consider them on the floor. My goal is to schedule floor action for every fiscal year 2026 appropriations bill that comes out of the committee, where they can be debated, amended, and passed for further negotiation with the House. And that, of course, will require cooperation from Democrats. But I really hope, that Democrats will remember this situation and others that we've been placed in and work in partnership with Republicans to restore the regular order appropriations process. Continuing resolutions are never the preferred option. But thanks to the Democrat leader's decision to abandon the fiscal year 2025 appropriations process, the continuing resolution we have before us is the best option we have to fund the government for the balance of this year. And so, Mr. President, it's time for the Democrat leader to acknowledge that it's his decisions that put us here and to urge his colleagues to accept the situation and vote to fund the government rather than to let it shut down at midnight on Friday. And if he doesn't, he'll have the American people to answer to. Mr. President, senators have been seeing a lot of each other lately. In fact, too much, some might say. The Senate is hopefully about to wrap up its 10th consecutive week in session, the Senate's longest in-session stretch in over 15 years. 10 weeks that include late nights, weekend work, and even an all-night session. And we have a lot of accomplishments to report back to our constituents when we're back in our states next week. The Senate has confirmed 21 members of President Trump's cabinet, and we've done it at the fastest pace since 2001. That's right. The Senate has gotten through hearings, markups, and floor votes on 21 cabinet nominees at a record pace. As a result, President Trump has more of his cabinet in place today than any president since George W. Bush. And we've also confirmed a lot of sub-cabinet officials and a new FBI director. And Senate committees are continuing to hold hearings and send more of the President's nominees to the floor for a vote. Mr. President, the Senate Republican majority has also been working to execute our legislative agenda. And at the top of the priority list is securing the border. And the first bill we sent to President Trump's desk was the Lake and Riley Act, which ensures that criminal illegal immigrants are detained when they're arrested for certain crimes and not returned to America's streets. Senator Britt led the debate on this bill on the floor, and we had an amendment process that made this bill stronger by adding Senator Ernst's bill, Sarah's Law, and elements of Senator Budd's bill, the Police Act. Senate Republicans also passed a budget resolution to unlock the process to provide resources to carry out President Trump's border agenda. We've already seen border crossings plummet in response to President Trump's border security measures. Criminal, illegal immigrants have been arrested and deported from cities around the country. But to continue these efforts and maintain a secure border will require additional resources, and we're determined to deliver them. We're also working to address the fentanyl crisis by passing the HALT Fentanyl Act. The HALT Fentanyl Act will permanently classify fentanyl-related substances as Schedule I drugs. We'll provide law enforcement with a critical tool to go after the people who are bringing this poison into our country and killing Americans. And I expect that we'll pass this bill soon. Mr. President, Senate Republicans are also working to eliminate some of the Biden administration's burdensome regulations. As part of our promise to unleash American energy, we passed Senator Hovind's resolution to block the Biden natural gas tax, and we also passed Senator Kennedy's resolution overturning a rule that would have stifled energy development in America's waters. To promote financial freedom, we passed resolutions from Senators Ricketts and Cruz to protect America's financial privacy. And there will be more regulatory relief to come. Mr. President, it's been a busy couple of months, and we've gotten a lot done. And we could have done even more if Democrats hadn't repeatedly chosen to use the filibuster. That's right. A few short months ago, when Democrats were in the majority, they were making plans to destroy the filibuster. Now they've been in the minority for 10 weeks. They've already used the filibuster 3 times. And what are the bills that they blocked? Well, first, there was the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, a bill that simply requires doctors to give a baby born alive after a failed abortion the same medical care that any other baby would receive. Then there was the ICC sanctions bill, which would have supported our ally Israel and protected American service members abroad. And then just last week, every Democrat joined a filibuster against Senator Tuberville's bill to keep biological men out of women's and girls' sports. And now, Democrats are threatening yet a 4th filibuster, this time to shut down the federal government tomorrow. I have to say, it's funny how Democrats' opposition to the filibuster changes with the prevailing winds. Mr. President, I promised last year that 2025 would be a busy year. And these past 10 weeks are just the beginning. Republicans are working to deliver for the American people, and we are just getting started. Mr. President, I yield the floor. And I don't yield the floor. Mr. President, I understand that there are 2 bills at the desk due for second readings.
The clerk will read the title of the bill for the second time.
S1008, a bill to provide equitable treatment for the people of the Village Corporation established for the native village of Saxman, Alaska, and for other purposes. H.R. 1156, an act to amend the CARES Act to extend the statute of limitation for fraud under certain unemployment programs and for other purposes.
Mr. President, in order to place these bills on the calendar under the provisions of Rule 14, I would object to further proceeding en bloc.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President, I
The bill
move to
will be placed on the
proceed
calendar.
to executive session to consider calendar number 41.
The question is on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The ayes appears to have it. Ayes do have it. The motion is agreed to. The clerk will report the nomination.
Nomination, Department of State, Christopher Landau of Maryland to be Deputy Secretary.
Mr. President, I send a cloture motion to the desk.
The clerk will report.
Motion to invoke cloture. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the nomination of Christopher Landau of Maryland to be Deputy Secretary of State, signed by 17 senators as follows.
Mr. President, I ask consent the reading of the names be waived.
Without objection. Under the previous order, the Senate resumes consideration of the following nominations, which the clerk will report.
Federal Housing Finance Agency